I remember the bus ride clearly because it was one of those quiet evenings when everyone seemed tired and no one wanted to speak. I had just finished work and was holding the metal pole near the middle of the bus when an elderly woman stepped on at the next stop. The driver lowered the ramp for her walker, and people shifted slightly to make space. I stood up and offered her my seat. She looked at me for a moment before sitting down, studying my face in a way that felt almost deliberate. Then she said something that seemed strangely specific. "When your husband gives you a necklace," she said, adjusting the sleeve of her coat, "leave it overnight in a glass of water." Her voice was calm, not mysterious, not dramatic, just certain. I gave a small polite smile the way people do when strangers offer odd advice. "All right," I said. She nodded once and looked out the window as if the conversation was finished. At the time, I didn't think much about it. I stepped off the bus 2 stops later and walked the remaining block to my apartment building. The air smelled faintly like rain and cold pavement, the kind of evening when the streetlights come on earlier than you expect. My name is Rachel Collins. I was 34 then, and I worked as a financial administrator for a mid-sized construction firm on the south side of Chicago. Most of my days were quiet and orderly. Numbers, reports, vendor accounts, payroll checks, the kind of work that required attention more than speed. By the time December approached that year, the daylight outside the office windows disappeared before most of us finished our last email. That evening, I closed the accounting folder on my desk, turned off my monitor, and leaned back slightly in my chair to stretch my neck. It was 5 minutes to 6. The office was already half empty. Somewhere down the hall, a copy machine hummed. A truck engine rumbled outside in the yard where the company kept its equipment. Through the tall window beside my desk, the asphalt parking lot looked almost black under the fading light. On the windowsill sat a small glass paperweight that had belonged to my father. I often turned it slowly between my fingers while reviewing reports. That evening, I did the same thing for a moment before slipping it back into place. Then I gathered my bag, switched off the desk lamp, and left. My husband Daniel was already home when I arrived. I could smell garlic and butter the moment I opened the apartment door. He was standing at the stove, stirring something in a small pan. "You're late," he said without turning around. "Year-end reports," I replied, hanging my coat on the hook near the door. Dinner was quiet the way weekday dinners often are. Plates, water glasses, the soft sound of the television from the living room. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would have made me remember that strange sentence from the bus. Not yet. 3 days later, Daniel came home carrying a small velvet box. He placed it gently on the table between us. "I saw it in a shop window today," he said. "Thought you might like it." Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small pale stone set in the center. It was simple, tasteful, the sort of gift that doesn't ask for much reaction. But when I looked at it, something surfaced quietly in my mind. A bus seat, a winter evening, an elderly woman adjusting the sleeve of her coat. "When your husband gives you a necklace, leave it overnight in a glass of water." I didn't mention the memory. I only thanked Daniel, closed the box carefully, and carried it into the kitchen. Then I took a clean drinking glass from the cabinet and filled it halfway with water. I set the necklace inside. Daniel looked over from the table. "What are you doing?" "Just cleaning it," I said calmly. He shrugged and returned to his phone. I left the glass on the kitchen counter and turned off the light. Then I waited. By morning, the water looked cloudy. Not heavily, just enough that I noticed it before I reached for the kettle. I stood there in the kitchen with my hand still on the cabinet handle and looked down at the glass for a few quiet seconds. The necklace sat at the bottom, its chain curled in on itself, the pale stone duller than it had looked the night before. I did not call for Daniel. I did not say his name. I poured my coffee, packed my lunch, and got ready for work. Before I left, I tipped the water into the sink and set the necklace on a folded paper towel to dry. At the office, the day began the way most days did. A delivery truck backing into the rear lot. Wet boot prints near the side entrance. Someone in operations laughing too loudly in the hallway before 8 in the morning. I sat down at my desk, opened the ledger review for subcontractor payments, and let the routine settle me. That was one thing I had learned early in life. If something feels wrong, Do not rush toward noise. Stay with what can be checked. At 10:15, Daniel texted me. Did you like it? I looked at the message for a moment before replying. Yes, thank you. A minute later, another one came in. You didn't wear it? I typed slowly. Not yet. I didn't want to wear it to the office first. He did not answer after that. Nothing in his messages was openly strange. Even then, I knew that. If I had shown the exchange to anyone else, they would have said the same thing. A husband asking about a gift. A normal conversation. But marriage teaches you the weight of small shifts. Tone changes before facts do. That evening, I took the necklace to a jeweler 2 blocks from my office instead of going straight home. The shop was narrow and quiet, with a brass bell over the door and a faint smell of polish and old velvet cases. A man in his 60s stood behind the counter wearing a gray sweater and half-moon glasses. I just want to have this cleaned and checked, I said. He laid a dark cloth on the glass counter and picked up the necklace carefully. He examined the clasp first, then the stone, then the metal around it. After that, he looked at me over his glasses. Was this sold as sterling silver? Yes, I said. He nodded once, not surprised. It's plated, he said. And this stone is imitation. Nothing wrong with costume jewelry, but it should be sold honestly. I rested my hand lightly on the counter. Could the metal cause cloudiness in water overnight? He gave the necklace another look. Possibly, he said. Depends on what it was exposed to before. Cleaning agents. Residue. Poor materials. Then he paused. There's also a small compartment under the setting. I looked at him. A compartment? He turned the piece very slightly and used a thin tool from the counter tray. With a careful movement, he loosened the back of the pendant. It opened just enough to show a narrow cavity beneath the stone. Empty. Still, seeing it there changed something in the air around me. What kind of necklace has that? I asked. He set it down. Sometimes perfume. Sometimes keepsakes. Sometimes something else. Hard to say. I thanked him, paid for the inspection slip, and asked him to write down the material details. He printed a small receipt and stapled it to a short note with the findings. I folded both papers and placed them inside my wallet. Then I walked home in the cold. Daniel was at the table when I came in, sleeves rolled up, laptop open. He looked up almost immediately. You're late again. I stopped on the way, I said, setting down my bag. His eyes moved to my coat pocket, then back to my face. Where? Errands. He watched me for a second too long, then nodded. At dinner, he was more attentive than usual. He refilled my water before I asked. He cleared plates quickly. He asked whether I had plans that weekend. I answered normally. I kept my voice even. I put the phone face down. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I got out of bed and walked into the living room with a blanket around my shoulders. I sat on the sofa, switched on the lamp beside the window, and opened the jeweler's note again. Plated metal. Imitation stone. Hidden compartment. I read it twice. Then I thought about the old woman on the bus. Not because I believed in omens. I didn't. What stayed with me was something simpler. She had not sounded afraid. She had sounded informed. The next morning was Saturday. Daniel left around 10, saying he needed to stop by a supply warehouse and then meet someone from work. He kissed my forehead on the way out and told me not to wait for lunch. I stood by the window until his car disappeared at the corner. Then I cleared the kitchen table, brought over my laptop, the necklace, the jeweler's slip, and a small notepad. I wasn't upset by then. I was organized. And once I had everything in front of me, I began with the first thing that made sense. I looked up where he had bought it. Then the receipt notification appeared in our shared credit card account. And I saw the name of the store. The store name was not one I recognized. It was a boutique jeweler on the north side, in a part of the city Daniel had no reason to be in during the workday. I checked the transaction details twice to make sure I was reading them correctly. The purchase had been made on Wednesday at 1:18 p.m. Daniel was supposed to be in Joliet that afternoon reviewing equipment delivery schedules. I wrote the time down. Then I logged out of the account and sat still for a moment, looking at the necklace where it lay on the table beside my pen. That was when the shape of the problem changed. Up to then, I had been dealing with an object. A gift. A strange warning. A jeweler's note. But timestamps are different. They belong to systems, not moods. They either fit or they do not. I opened our shared digital calendar. Daniel had blocked off Wednesday from 11 to 4 for a site visit. Then I checked the tollway statement tied to the company vehicle transponder we both occasionally used when we traveled together. No toll charge appeared anywhere near Joliet that day. I wrote that down too. By noon, I had 3 clean facts in front of me. 1, he said he had been on a work visit. 2, the necklace was purchased across the city at 1:18 p.m. 3. There was no matching vehicle record for the route he claimed to have taken. None of that was proof of anything large on its own. I knew that, but it was enough to keep going. I made tea, carried the mug back to the table, and opened the phone bill. Daniel and I had separate mobile lines on the same account. Normally, I never looked closely at usage because there had never been a reason to. That afternoon, I downloaded the statement and began with Wednesday. Several calls to subcontractors. 2 short calls from the office. 1 repeated number I did not know, each call lasting less than a minute. 12:52 p.m., 1:41 p.m., 3:06 p.m. I copied the number onto my notepad. Then I searched it in the simplest ways first. No name attached. No business listing. No company profile. After that, I entered it into a payment contact search, then a public records directory I used occasionally when vendor paperwork came in incomplete. A name appeared. Lena Mercer. Not a client. Not anyone from his office. An address followed, listed in a newer apartment building near the same neighborhood as the jewelry shop. I did not react right away. I only looked at the screen, then at the necklace again. There are moments when emotion would almost be easier. Anger gives people something immediate to do. But I have always trusted sequence more than impulse. If something matters, I prefer to see how it is built. So I made a second page in the notepad. At the top I wrote, "What can be verified?" Under it, store time, phone number, address, vehicle route, work calendar. Then I moved to the next source. Daniel kept most things casually. Receipts in his coat pocket. Fuel slips in the center console. Passwords reused across too many accounts. He relied on the appearance of order more than order itself. I had noticed that for years without naming it. When he came home that evening, I was folding laundry in the bedroom. He stood in the doorway and loosened his collar. "You have a quiet day?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He watched me fold one of his shirts. "Did you ever wear the necklace?" "Not yet." He gave a small smile that did not fully settle on his face. "You're being strange about that gift." I smoothed the sleeve of the shirt before placing it on the bed. "I'm not," I said. "I just haven't worn it yet." He said nothing after that. Later, when he went to shower, I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where he dropped his keys and loose receipts every evening. There were only 2 slips inside, one from a gas station, one from a parking garage. The parking garage was 3 blocks from the jeweler. I checked the printed time, 12:47 p.m. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer, and rinsed out my teacup. The water ran warm over my fingers. The apartment was quiet except for the shower behind the bathroom door. Then I dried my hands and looked at my notes again. By then, I was no longer trying to understand whether something was wrong. I was deciding how carefully to proceed. And just before midnight, my phone lit up with a message from a number I did not know. It contained only an address. And one sentence. I did not answer the message right away. I read it once, then again, and set the phone down on the kitchen counter. The apartment was dark except for the light above the stove. Daniel was already asleep. From the bedroom, I could hear the steady sound of the ceiling fan and the occasional shift of the mattress when he turned over. The message stayed on the screen. No name, no explanation, just an address and a time. I copied the address into a search window and found a small coffee shop near the river, open on Sundays, quiet by the look of it. Not far from the apartment building tied to the number I had found earlier. That mattered. Then I waited. I have never believed in making important decisions late at night unless I have to. Tired people create noise for themselves. So I locked my phone, rinsed my glass, checked that the front door was bolted, and went to bed. In the morning, I woke before Daniel. The room was still gray with early light. He was asleep on his side, one hand under the pillow, breathing evenly. I stayed still for a moment, then got up, showered, and dressed for a normal Sunday. Jeans, sweater, hair tied back. In the kitchen, I made coffee and took out my notepad. By then, I knew enough to stop guessing and start working in order. I wrote 3 lines. Step 1, confirm who sent the message. Step 2, confirm what they know. Step 3, decide what must be documented before anything is said aloud. Then I tore the page neatly from the pad and folded it into my wallet with the jeweler's note. Daniel came into the kitchen around 8, still sleepy, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. "You're up early," he said. I couldn't sleep. He poured his coffee and leaned against the counter. "I may go out for a while this afternoon," he said. "A friend needs help looking at some equipment for a side job." I looked at him over the rim of my cup. "All right." He nodded once, as if that settled something, then changed the subject and asked whether we needed groceries. His voice was normal. So was mine. Just before 1:30, he left. I gave him 10 minutes, then put on my coat, picked up my bag, and drove to the coffee shop. It was quieter than I expected. A long front window, 2 people working on laptops, the smell of espresso and warm milk in the air. I chose a table where I could see both the entrance and most of the room without being obvious about it. At 2:03, a woman stepped inside and looked around once before walking toward me. She was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, wearing a dark coat and carrying a structured leather bag. She did not smile. "Rachel," she asked. "Yes." She sat down across from me without removing her coat. "My name is Lena," she said. I did not act surprised. She noticed that. "So you already know my name," she said. "I know the number connected to it," I replied. She gave a small nod, as if that matched what she expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A milk steamer hissed behind the counter. Someone at the window closed a laptop. The room remained calm around us in that ordinary way public places do, even when something private is happening inside them. Then Lena opened her bag and placed a small envelope on the table between us. "I'm not here to argue with you," she said. "And I'm not here because I want anything from you. I only found out about you 3 days ago." I rested my hand beside my cup, but did not touch the envelope. "How?" I asked. "He told me the necklace was for his sister," she said. "I was with him when he bought it." I said nothing. She watched my face carefully, then continued. "I didn't know he was married. Not at first. He kept everything separate. Different phone habits. Different times he could talk. The usual things people explain away when they want to believe someone." She said it plainly, without trying to make herself sympathetic. That made it easier to listen. "When did you find out?" I asked. "Thursday night," she said. "A restaurant hostess called him by his full name while we were waiting for a table. I searched him when I got home. I found an old charity board listing with your last name attached to his." She paused. After that, I kept looking. Then she slid the envelope closer to me. Inside were printed screenshots. Parking confirmations, a hotel invoice, a delivery receipt for flowers, a photo of Daniel standing by a lakefront railing in the same brown coat he had told me was at the dry cleaner that weekend. Each page had dates, times, locations. I went through them slowly. Nothing theatrical, just records. "How long?" I asked. 8 months, maybe 9, she said. I ended it yesterday. He kept calling after that. I turned one of the printed pages toward me again and read the hotel invoice a second time. Room number, date, check-in time. He paid with his own card? I asked. He used different cards, she said. Sometimes cash, sometimes a business card, I think. I only have what I could pull before he noticed I still had access to a few confirmations. That line stayed with me. A business card? She nodded. Not in the sense of a credit card from a store. I mean a company card. I saw the company name once when he was signing a receipt. I looked up from the papers. What company name? She told me. It was not his employer. It was one of the subcontractor vendors my office had been paying for almost a year. I sat back slightly in my chair. That was the first moment the matter moved beyond marriage. Lena saw the shift in my face. "What is it?" she asked. I placed the pages back in order before answering. The name you just gave me is attached to a vendor account I reconcile every month, I said. Daniel has no formal role in that process. She frowned. I don't understand. I know, I said. Neither do I. Not yet. That was the truth. Up to then, I had been following the trail. Personal, contained, ugly in the ordinary way these things are ugly. But now there was a second line running beside it. Money, process, records. The kind of line that leaves a trail. Lena reached into her bag again. There's one more thing, she said. I almost didn't bring it. She took out a key card sleeve from a hotel downtown. Inside it was a folded valet ticket with Daniel's handwriting across the back. Not a note, just a number, a unit number, and beneath it, a building name I recognized from the vendor file. I looked at the writing for several seconds before folding the paper once and slipping it back into the sleeve. Then I put everything back into the envelope, zipped it into my bag, and looked out the window at the street for a moment. I already knew what came next. Not confrontation, verification. And when I returned to my car, there was a voicemail waiting from the office controller, marked urgent, asking me to call her back before the end of the day about an irregular payment request that had just come through. I sat in the driver's seat with the envelope on the passenger side and listened to the voicemail twice before calling the controller back. Her name was Marianne, and she had been with the company longer than I had. Careful woman. Not excitable. If she marked something urgent on a Sunday, it usually meant one thing. She had already checked it once herself and still didn't like it. She answered on the second ring. Rachel, sorry to bother you on the weekend. It's all right, I said. What came in? A payment authorization request, she said. Large amount. Flagged as accelerated. It's tied to North Shore Utility Services. I looked at the windshield without really seeing it. That was the vendor Lena had named. What amount? I asked. She told me. It was high enough that it should have required 2 internal approvals and supporting delivery documentation. Who submitted it? I asked. There was a brief pause. It originated through a forwarded email from Daniel Collins. I did not speak for a moment. Not because I was surprised. By then I was past surprise. I only wanted to be precise before I answered. Daniel isn't authorized to initiate vendor payments, I said. I know, Marianne replied. That's why I stopped it. He referenced a field emergency and said the paperwork would catch up Monday morning. I wanted you to look at it first. Don't release anything, I said. Not today. Not tomorrow morning. Put a hold note on the account and lock the approval queue until I review the file in person. I can do that. Also send me the forwarded email chain, header included. I already did. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat still for a few more seconds. Then I opened the message on my phone. There it was. Daniel's name. His personal email. A short, confident note written in the tone people use when they assume process will bend for them, because it usually has. The wording was clean. Urgent but not panicked. Just enough detail to sound legitimate to someone who wanted to help quickly. But the attached support document had metadata from a template I knew well, because I was one of the people who maintained it. It had been altered outside the company system. I saved the email. Then I drove home. Daniel was already back when I arrived. His shoes were by the door, his keys in the tray, and he was in the living room watching a game with the sound low. He looked over as I stepped inside. Where'd you go? He asked. Coffee, I said, taking off my coat. With who? No one you know. He muted the television. That small click of silence in the room felt more important than his words. I called you earlier, he said. I know. You didn't answer. I was out. He studied me for a moment, then stood. Is something going on? I set my bag on the chair by the door and straightened the strap once before letting go of it. Yes, I said, but I'd prefer to discuss it at the table. His face changed slightly at that. Not alarm. Not yet. Just caution. We moved into the kitchen. I did not rush. I took out 2 glasses, filled one with water for myself, and sat down. Daniel remained standing for a second before taking the chair opposite me. What is this? He asked. I folded my hands lightly on the table. This is a conversation I'd like to keep orderly, I said. So I'm going to say a few things, and I'd like you not to interrupt unless I ask you a direct question. He gave a short laugh that did not sound natural. Rachel, what exactly? I looked at him once, and he stopped. Then I began. On Wednesday at 1:18 p.m., a necklace was purchased at a jewelry shop on the north side. You told me you bought it because you happened to see it in a window. At that same time, your calendar showed a site visit in Joliet. There is no tollway record supporting that trip. Later, I found a parking receipt placing you 3 blocks from the jeweler. He leaned back in his chair, expression closing. So you checked up on me? I verified what didn't align. He opened his mouth, but I continued before he could answer. There's more. The necklace is plated. The stone is imitation. The pendant contains a hidden compartment. I had it inspected. For the first time, he looked uncertain. What are you talking about? I'm talking about facts, I said. Now I'll ask a direct question. Who is Lena Mercer? His eyes shifted, just once. That was enough. He exhaled through his nose and sat back further. This is insane. That isn't an answer. She's no one. I nodded slightly. All right, then let me be more precise. I met her this afternoon. She provided dates, hotel records, purchase confirmations, and photographs covering roughly 8 to 9 months. He said nothing. I reached into my bag, removed the envelope, and placed it on the table without sliding it toward him. I'm not asking whether you approve of the source, I said. I'm informing you that the timeline is documented. He stared at the envelope, then at me. You met her? Yes. His jaw tightened. So this was planned? You two compared notes like this is some kind of game. No, I said. This is called record review. That landed more heavily than anything else I had said. His voice rose slightly, not loud, but sharper now. You had no right to go through my things. I had every right to verify information that intersects with my finances, my home, and my name. He pushed his chair back an inch. This is about a necklace and some woman who got attached. That's what this is. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I moved to the second matter. No, I said. That was the first issue. The second is North Shore Utility Services. He went still. It was not dramatic. Just still. I watched that carefully. This afternoon, I continued. A payment request came in through a forwarded email from you. Large amount. Accelerated release. Incomplete support. You are not authorized to initiate those payments. He looked away first, toward the counter, then back to me. That was a favor, he said. The site was behind. You don't work in payment operations. It was just to keep things moving. You used a doctored template. His voice dropped. You don't know that. I do. I maintain the live versions. Neither of us moved for a few seconds. Outside, a car door shut somewhere in the street below. In the apartment above us, someone dragged a chair across the floor. Ordinary sounds. They helped. I took a sip of water and set the glass down. Here is the current position, I said. The payment is frozen. The email chain is preserved. The vendor link is under review. I have not yet escalated beyond the controller. His face had gone pale in a way that made him look older. You would do that to me? I answered carefully. I am not doing anything to you. I am responding to what already exists. He stood then and walked 2 steps away from the table, one hand on his hip, the other over his mouth. When he turned back, his voice had softened, but not in a way that felt honest. It was the voice of someone trying to move the discussion back into private fog. Rachel, he said, whatever this looks like, it's not what you think. I can explain it. I'm sure you can explain many versions of it. His eyes narrowed. You always do this. You act like everything is a file. No, I said. Only the things that leave records. That was the moment he understood the conversation was not going to drift into confusion, apology, blame, or emotion. It was going to remain where I had placed it, on the table, in sequence. He pulled up the chair again, but did not sit. What do you want? I answered without pause. Tonight, I want your company laptop, your personal laptop, and the passwords for any shared financial accounts we haven't already updated jointly. I also want your access card for the apartment garage. Tomorrow morning, I will go to the office early and conduct a formal review before anyone else touches the vendor file. He stared at me. You can't be serious. I am. And if I say no, then step 2 begins without your cooperation. He said nothing. I reached into my bag again and took out a single sheet of paper from the envelope. Not the photographs. Not the hotel invoice. Just the vendor email header Marianne had sent me. I placed it in front of him. He looked down at it. I watched his expression change as he recognized the metadata line near the bottom. That was enough for him to understand how far this had already gone. Then the phone on the counter vibrated. A new message came in. It was from Marianne. Pulled prior payment logs. Same vendor appears 3 times. You need to see this in person. I left for the office before sunrise. The streets were still mostly empty, and the city had that muted look it gets in winter before businesses open and traffic settles into its usual rhythm. I parked in the rear lot, let myself in through the side entrance, and walked down the dim hallway toward accounting with my keys in one hand and coffee in the other. The building always sounded different that early. Ventilation first, then the refrigerator in the break room, then nothing. I switched on the lights over my desk, set down my bag, and opened the vendor file for North Shore Utility Services. Marianne arrived 15 minutes later carrying a folder and 2 printed spreadsheets. She did not ask unnecessary questions. That was one reason I trusted her. I isolated the last 6 months, she said, placing the papers beside my keyboard. 3 accelerated payments. Same vendor. Similar formatting issues. Similar urgency language. I read through the payment logs line by line. The pattern was quiet, but obvious once it was laid side by side. Each request had come in close to a weekend or holiday. Each one referenced field urgency. Each one bypassed the normal support chain in a slightly different way, as if the person behind it understood just enough procedure to imitate it without fully understanding how the controls linked together. Amounts? I asked. She told me. Together, they were large enough to matter to the company and small enough to have escaped notice if no one compared them directly. I opened the archived vendor registration packet. The business existed. On paper, at least. Basic license. Tax ID. Service category. Mailing address. But the emergency contact line matched a number from Daniel's call records. Not exactly the same number Lena had used. Another one. Still his. I wrote that down. Then I checked the bank remittance details tied to the vendor. The receiving account had been updated twice in 8 months. Both changes had been approved through email documentation rather than a secure portal because, according to the notes, the vendor had reported temporary access issues. That alone was enough to bring in compliance review. By 8:30, Marianne and I had assembled a clean packet. Vendor registration history, approval logs, email headers, remittance changes, payment dates, my notes on authorization limits, a copy of Daniel's forwarded request from the day before. No opinions, no personal material, just business records. At 9, we took it to the controller and the company's outside compliance counsel, who happened to be on site for year-end review meetings. I knew the attorney slightly. Quiet man, very precise. He read quickly, asked 3 direct questions, and then requested the original system access logs. When those came back, the final piece settled into place. 2 of the vendor record changes had been made from Daniel's device through a shared guest login that should never have remained active after an office renovation 6 months earlier. The 3rd had come from an IP address tied to our apartment internet account late at night on a Saturday. The attorney looked at the screen, then at me. Was your husband ever authorized to work in these systems? No, I said. Did he have any legitimate reason to access vendor records from home? No, he nodded once and turned to the controller. You need to suspend all pending payments tied to this vendor, lock the account, notify the bank, and begin an internal fraud response process today. That was the business consequence. The personal one came a little later. Just after 11, Daniel called twice. I did not answer. Then he sent a message asking whether I had done something at his office. Another followed asking why one of the vendor managers was suddenly refusing to speak with him. I put the phone face down. At noon, I went home with a printed notice from counsel, a list of shared accounts to separate, and a simple plan for the rest of the day. The apartment was quiet when I entered. Daniel was there, standing in the kitchen with both hands flat on the counter. He turned as soon as he heard the door. What did you do? He asked. His voice was controlled, but only barely. I set my bag down and placed the printed notice on the table between us. Your company access has been reported as unauthorized interference in a vendor payment process, I said. The vendor account is frozen. The bank has been notified. Internal counsel has opened a fraud review. He looked at the paper but did not touch it. You went to my office? No. I went to mine. He let out a short breath and shook his head once, like he was trying to clear it. This is unbelievable. No, I said. It's documented. He pulled out a chair and sat, then stood again immediately. He could not settle. That told me more than anger would have. They can't prove intent, he said. At worst, it looks sloppy. A favor. That's all. I took off my coat and hung it neatly by the door before answering. The receiving account led back through layered updates and contact numbers connected to you. The access logs place your devices inside the changes. The weekend request completed the pattern. He stared at me. For the first time since this began, he looked frightened. Not hurt, not offended, frightened. I was going to fix it, he said quietly. I looked at him for a moment before replying. That sentence usually arrives late. He sat down then and covered his mouth with one hand. I did not move closer. I did not offer comfort. I only took the folder from my bag and placed a second document on the table. It was the prepared separation sheet for our joint accounts, apartment access, and utility transfers. This is the personal part, I said. I've moved my salary deposit. The shared card is frozen. The lease office has been notified that your garage access is being removed pending occupancy review. You can collect your remaining personal items this week, but not tonight. His head lifted sharply. You're throwing me out? I'm ending shared access. He looked down at the paper again. There was no shouting after that. A few more sentences. 2 attempts to return the conversation to explanation. One careful effort to make himself sound tired rather than responsible. But the shape of it had already closed. By late afternoon, he had packed his suitcase and left with it. 3 days later, the company terminated the vendor relationship, referred the matter to its insurer and outside investigators, and recovered part of the transferred funds before the final account could be emptied. Daniel resigned from his consulting role with another firm before they could dismiss him. I later learned that Lena had given a formal statement about the dates and locations tied to the hotel invoices and meetings. It helped establish timeline overlap. Nothing more than that. Facts. Enough. No one dramatic called me after. No one arrived with speeches. The truth moved the way it usually does when records are strong. Quietly. Directly. And all the way through. A week later, the apartment sounded different. Not better in any dramatic sense. Just clearer. I noticed small things first. 1 coffee cup in the drying rack instead of 2. No extra shoes near the door. No half-open drawers in the kitchen. No voice from the other room asking where something had been left. On Saturday morning, I opened the windows for a little while, even though the air was cold. Then I wiped down the kitchen counters, sorted the mail into neat stacks, and boxed the last of the things Daniel had not taken. I labeled the box with a black marker and set it near the hall closet for pickup. After that, I made tea. I stood by the sink while it steeped, looking out at the parking lot below. A delivery van backed into place near the next building. Someone in a red scarf walked a small white dog across the sidewalk. Ordinary movement. Ordinary noise. I was grateful for it. By then, most of the necessary conversations had already happened. The lease office had updated the access records. The bank had confirmed the account separation. My employer had finished its first internal review and handed the rest to outside investigators. Lena sent one short message to say she hoped things had become quieter for me. I answered that they had. That was enough. People sometimes imagine that the end of something like this should feel sharp or triumphant. Mine did not. It felt administrative at first, then tired. Then gradually, over several mornings, it began to feel like ownership. I started sleeping with my phone in the living room again. I reorganized the hallway cabinet. I changed the passwords on accounts I should have separated earlier. I replaced the kitchen glass that had held the necklace overnight, not because I needed to, but because I wanted a clean set of things that belonged only to my own routine. The necklace itself stayed in a small envelope in the back of a drawer with the inspection slip attached. Not as a keepsake, just as part of a finished record. A month later, I took a different bus home from work and found myself watching the passengers each time the doors opened. Not because I expected to see that elderly woman again. I didn't. Some people step into your life, say one useful thing, and keep going. Maybe that is all they were meant to do. Still, I thought about her from time to time. Not about the warning itself, but about the steadiness of it. She had not tried to frighten me. She had simply handed me one small instruction and trusted me to do the rest. And maybe that is what stayed with me most after everything settled. Not betrayal. Not even exposure. Just the value of one calm act done at the right time. A few weeks after all of that, a woman from payroll asked whether I had a minute to look at something odd in a reimbursement file. Her tone was careful in a way I recognized immediately. I told her to send it over and I would review it before lunch. There are always other files, other patterns, other people standing quietly at the edge of something they have not named yet. That afternoon, I cleared my desk, shut down my monitor, and put the phone face down before leaving the office. Outside, the light was fading across the lot the way it always did in winter. I stood there for a moment with my bag over my shoulder, then walked to my car and drove home. That was enough for one day. And if you stayed with me through this story, thank you. I'm glad you were here. If you enjoy calm, real stories like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. I always like seeing where people are listening from. 2 popular stories will be appearing next, and I think you'll enjoy those too.